Hello and welcome to another episode of the Help Is Here podcast brought to you by the Beyond's Compulsion Academy. Today I'm joined by Mary Paulus. We're going to be disseminating in the realm of Hungry Ghosts by Gabor Maté. We've got a lot of notes to get through, a lot of
Wow,
what we call junky thoughts, a lot of
that's
unanswerable.
impressive.
Yeah. I mean, it took me some time to go through this, like probably spent about 20 to 30 hours analyzing this book. It's very, very interesting. And my mind was blown. I could not believe how much confusion there was around how to deal with compulsivity, how to deal with addiction, the helplessness, the language used, the examples from Gabor Mate's personal life of him struggling with addiction and his perspective on it and his understanding of it. It's all just one big mess, really. At the same time, there's some parts in this book which I think are very like deep and heavy. Talking about real life situations with people struggling with addiction, talking
Right.
about some horrendous trauma that some people have been through. And I truly believe that like Gabor Mate has done his very, very best in writing this, and he does want to help people, and he's very passionate about helping people. But his mental stance on things is almost the opposite of ours, especially with helplessness. So it's a lot to get through. Mary,
Yeah,
if you, yeah,
I
go
have
ahead.
the book on my bookshelf,
Yeah,
but I never read it. I don't know why I bought it when I bought it for whatever, but like I say, there's a lot of relating, which is good,
yeah,
to have people to go, oh, I've had this trauma. Oh, I'm suffering with this addiction, that's good, but that's where most things end. As far as comprehensive, how am I going to deal with this and how I'm going to really change this? Because, and we'll get into it, I'm sure, relating to people that have the same struggles and dealing with trauma, not going to get you out of addiction. So, anyway, launch.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's it. So what we'll do then is I think we start off with the good. There's a lot of good in this book. There's a lot which does align with what we teach. And then we can get into some of the examples of Gabor Mate's own personal addiction, which is very vulnerable in this book in sharing, which I have a lot of respect for. I think,
Yeah.
fair play to him for talking about his own personal stories and not trying to come across like he's got everything sorted. He doesn't do that in this book at all. He's very transparent and honest about things and his own sort of inabilities to deal with his addicted part of the mind. So respect to him for doing that. And then we can maybe talk about the language that actually leads to him and a lot of people being in addiction. Because to me, addiction isn't so much about who you are. Well, in fact, I don't think it's got anything to do with like who you intrinsically are or your
Right.
DNA or genetics. I don't think it's got much to do with that at all. I think it's really about how you think about things, the words you use, your perspective, your mental stance, and of course, what actual education and tools you have to deal with compulsive desires. And in this book, there's a lot of language which is contributing to people staying stuck in addiction. Language like Gabor Mate is using very much unintentionally. I doubt he has any idea that he's using language which actually lends itself to helplessness. It's unintentional. He wants to do his best. But I think it's really important to analyze and critique this because I read this many years ago when I was in a deep porn addiction in a really bad mental place. And this is the sort of book I would have read to think, oh, maybe this will help me, but it doesn't. And unless you're aware of junky thinking and unanswerable questions, this kind of book can actually make things a little bit worse for people, in my opinion. And it definitely didn't help me get out of addiction at all. So
Yeah.
hopefully, this analysis of it can help someone
And
out there.
I'm just wondering too, like, why is he like the most popular guy out there if he's admittedly in the book saying he's in an addiction?
It's a good question.
Why would you want to take advice from someone who's still trapped?
Yeah, yeah. I don't
Doesn't
know.
really make sense. But I guess maybe there's just marketing. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's go. Yeah, let's see what you got on all those sticky notes, Tom.
All right, we'll take them out one by one and let's see how we
Okay.
get on. Might be a long podcast as well. I've got so many sticky notes. I can't see how we're going to get through this in less than 2 hours, but let's see. Okay, we'll start off with the good. So I'm just going to pick out some quotes. This is about addiction. Addiction is passion's dark. How do you say this word, Mary? Simulacrum. Is that how you say it? Simulacrum.
I don't even know what that word is.
He uses so many words which are like really big as well. I think that might be why he's so popular. He's clearly a smart guy in some ways. um,
What? Let's look it up. What is it?
I don't know.
Let's see what it means actually. Here, give it to me and I'll
Simu, so Simulacrum. And this is the thing as well
oh,
to anyone listening. I'm not going to pretend to be some
an image
super
or
smart guy.
representation of someone or something.
What did you say, sorry?
Oh, there's a couple. Okay. And what about an unsatisfactory imitation or substitute?
Okay, so it says addiction is passion's dark simulacrum. And to the naive observer, it's
Oh, okay.
perfect
Well,
mimic.
okay. So that unsatisfactory imitation. So he's saying that addiction is it's not people think that it's passion, but it's not.
Okay, right. And then
I
he
don't know
says,
what passion has to do with addiction, but go ahead.
yeah, and then he's on about it resembles passion in its urgency and in the promise of fulfillment, but its gifts are illusory. It's a black hole. The more you offer it, the more it demands. Unlike passion, its alchemy does not create new elements from old. So yeah, it's quite wordy, all of that to me anyway. As I
Yeah,
said,
that's really wordy.
yeah, I'm not the smartest guy around, but I know how to deal with compulsive desires and addiction, which is what's important. But anyway, so basically what he's saying is, yeah, the more you engage in your compulsive behavior, the more you want to engage, which is what we say all the time as well. So that's true. It is
It's
like
a
a black
lot
hole.
easier to understand. You do it, you want to do it
Yeah, exactly. You do
versus
it, you want to
the
do it again.
passion of the simulacrum.
Mary, this is meant to be the good, all right? We'll calm down on the roasting until we get to the bad. Let's be patient. Let's be patient.
I'll
Okay.
shut up.
Right. So that's good though. That is true. And I do want to talk about that quickly. Just people think that they are stuck in addiction for so many years because of, some deep underlying reason. But it's actually because every time you engage in compulsive behaviors, you strengthen your addictive neural pathways. That's why you get stuck. Because every time you relapse, you stay stuck. Like you create those strengthened addictive neural pathways, and you act on the desire, and then you want to do it again and again and again and again.
But just I know this is the good or whatever, but okay, and I get we're saying that this is a simulacrum, so it's imitate, trying to imitate passion or whatever. But why even talk about it like that? Because something you're passionate about, that implies that's a good thing. You're passionate. You did this thing you're going to do that's going to be, whatever. I don't know. I wouldn't even compare it to passion. I would just call it addiction, compulsion, feeling compelled. You know,
Mm, mm.
passion to me has positives. You know, but
Oh,
I guess I
Mary.
get what he's saying. I get what he's saying. But that we have to dissect that sentence that much to even understand it is kind of I don't know. But he's a PhD, right?
Yeah, he's a smart guy, very smart
I
guy.
graduated from high school.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, yeah.
Yay me! Yay
Yeah.
you!
I
Yeah,
dropped out of university. I was like, these lectures, it's kind of dumb, in my
yeah.
opinion.
I
But
went to I went to university for a while for graphic design, but learned what I needed to know and went and used it. So
yeah, that's the main thing. It's
yeah,
using things that matters. Okay.
yeah.
Anyway,
Okay.
so now we've got another one. Okay, yeah, this is really, really nice. Someone was talking about how things were going better in their life after addiction. I think they'd been in a 12 steps group and things were going better. And um, they said sometimes it feels like things are completely falling apart, like this week, but I no longer confuse stuff that happens with my life. This moment is okay, even when things are coming apart at the seams. Right here, right now, at this moment, things are okay. And then he quotes Eckhart Tolle with, "Forget about your life situation for a while and pay attention to your life. Your life situation exists in time. Your life is now. So I just like that bit because again, it aligns with what we teach, which is about the present moment and the present
Yeah.
moment being the most important thing. Now, these two quotes, I mean, one's from someone who was in his like 12 steps group or something, or one of his, I think it might have been one of his previous clients. I'm not quite sure. And then the other quote was from Eckhart Tolle, whose book I've read a few times as well. But yeah, I like that because it's about the present moment, which is what we talk about a
Yeah.
lot.
Can you tell me the Eckhart Tolle again one more time?
Yeah, yeah. So I think there was two quotes. Forget about your life situation for a while and pay attention to your life. And then the other one is your life situation exists in time. Your life is now.
Yeah, okay, in the moment. Yeah, 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 I get that. That like we do talk about in the moment, but forget your life situation. When your life situation is addiction, full-time gig in your brain, oh, just forget that and just be like whatever, all sounds like a meme. Memes
Yeah.
can't create addiction. It's all lovely language and sounds pretty poetic too,
Mm,
but
mm,
I don't know. The only
yeah.
thing I get from that is like being in the moment, but just
Mm,
forget your life situation or whatever it said. No, it's
yeah,
just like,
yeah.
oh,
It's
that's
more
not
about
possible. That's not possible. You can't just forget that you're like completely fucking miserable, you
mm,
know, because you have an addiction you can't get out of.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that's the good. I mean, this is
thank
the
you.
good, and you're already kind of hating on it. So I'm very worried about the junky thoughts and the examples I'm going to give you in a bit because they're going to be
I'm
pretty
just trying
extreme.
to educate people
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, the
because
truth.
like how many people are going to read this book? They have this horrible addiction. They're going to be just forget about your life circumstances and be in the moment. Let's all zen out and meditate and they're like, what's wrong with me? I can't do that. I can't forget about this. What's wrong with me? Oh my God. I am an overthinker. I have OCD.
Mm,
Something's wrong with me. I'm going to go to the therapist. I'm going to get medications. Because they can't do that. No, you can't do that because you have an addiction.
yeah,
Addictive thoughts, junky thinking refuses to be ignored. Addictive desire refuses to be ignored. You can't just not think about that.
yeah, yeah. It,
Okay, don't worry.
you're,
I'm not, no, I'm just educating. I'm not, I'm nice person.
Well, it reminds me of 5.1, like within the Beyond Compulsion Academy, where we talk about proactive versus reactive. And I tell the story of, well, I tell a few stories. And then in the attack versus defense as well in 5.2, I talk about Sheffield Wednesday being 4-0 down. And it's like when you're in the addiction, it's like you're losing a game, like you're losing against the addicted part of the mind. Not that it
Okay.
should really be like some war or a battle or a fight, but at that point in time, the addicted part of the mind's in control. The only way for you to overcome an addiction is by getting the rational mind back in control, and you've got to
Yeah.
take back control. Like you've got to be proactive. Like there has to be action in terms of actually changing your thinking, changing your thought patterns, changing your neural pathways. That is
Yeah.
required to overcome an addiction. And so, forget about life and let's just all be in the present moment. It can work temporarily, but it's not going to actually change the neural pathways which keep people stuck. So I think that's what you're getting at there,
Yeah,
isn't it?
because like all the lovely poetic memes are very
Mm,
passive and la la la,
yeah, yeah,
where we got to, be very proactive, have an offensive strategy, the mental stance, which we're not going to go into in this podcast, of course.
yeah. So
Yeah.
another quote here then. There are controversies, as we shall see, but everyone agrees that on the basic physiological level, addiction represents a different state of the brain, in the words of physician and researcher Charles O'Brien. So again, this is another quote because if I'm honest, the best bits in this book are usually quotes from other people's work, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, I just like to see that this Charles O'Brien guy, who's like, very probably got a lot of qualifications and stuff. He talks about addiction representing a different state of the brain, and we talk about the addicted part of the mind literally all the time. And that's how we see things as well, is that it is a different state of the brain. It's not like it's not like it. Well, Mary, do you want to just talk about this a bit more and explain that a bit further?
Well, I think that the physiological stuff, it's useful to an extent to think like, okay, well, there's a different part of the brain, right? But when it gets to the really scientific parts of that, I find it really boring for starters, because most people don't understand that stuff, and understanding, okay, there's a different part of my brain, that's okay, fine. And, but we just had that thing where that seminar you went to or whatever, where they said with addiction or what you can't
Well, he
you
said
can't
the
engage
prefrontal
the prefrontal cortex.
said the prefrontal cortex goes offline. That was the word,
Yeah, it goes
offline.
offline. Okay, so it's offline. What you got no Wi-Fi signal, so now what you can't get to it. You just can't get to it. No, you can engage the prefrontal cortex, but that's what you need a tool for.
Mm,
Sure as hell isn't going to be meditation.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, you got to really assertively, proactively, offensive strategy, engage that, and that's what we do with the script. So,
Mm.
but it's understanding that how the brain works is sort of helpful a little bit maybe, but what are you gonna do about it?
Mm.
That's what I would ask. I'm not gonna
Yeah, but
meditate it. Meditation's not gonna change it.
it's good that at least they're acknowledging in here that it is a different part of the
Yep,
brain.
yep,
It's not the
yep,
rational mind that's responsible for engaging
yep.
in compulsive
That's
behaviors.
helpful.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, more here. Grasping the powerful impact of the early environment on brain development may leave us feeling hopelessly gloomy about recovery from addiction. Because basically, in this chapter, he was talking about trauma, stress, and the biology of addiction. And there's loads of junky thoughts in here around that. And, he's talking about the hopelessness, which we talk about a lot as well. But then there's a nice little final sentence here after basically just talking about how addiction is caused by trauma. He then says, "It so happens there are solid reasons not to despair. Our brains are resilient organs. Some important circuits continue to develop throughout our entire lives, and they may do so even in the ease, even in the case, of a hardcore drug addict whose brain never had a chance in childhood." That's the good news on the physical level. So basically, after saying that addiction is completely caused by sort of trauma and biology and things like that and stress, he then at least says that the brain can change, and this kind of a loose sort of way of him kind of saying about neuroplasticity. But it's not the best, but it was just kind of probably the most
Well, that
uplift.
is good
Uh,
news.
yeah.
How? How are we gonna do that, Gabor?
Well, there's a bit towards the end where he kind of talks about what's worked for him a little bit.
Yeah, we'll
Um,
get there. Well, but if he's
yeah.
admittedly in an addiction, it's not working very well.
Yeah. I mean, if I was listening to this though, and you're just saying like, well, how do you do that? I would probably be thinking, well, how are you guys any better if you're not just going to tell us on the podcast how to do it? So
All
what would
right.
you say to
Yeah.
that?
Well, one of the reasons that we wouldn't tell someone on the podcast is because there's a sequence of learning, levels of training that build up even to be able to attempt to stop an addictive behavior. And to give bits and pieces of that does no service to someone that's going to use the program to actually try to stop.
Mm,
It takes away from the impact of the learning of the levels. We're not here on this podcast to teach people how to stop an addictive behavior. We're here to tell people that if you're not able to stop, maybe some of the information that you're getting is working against you rather than working for you. So do not despair.
mm.
I think,
Yeah.
we can't, piecemealing the Beyond Compulsion Academy, program, that's not going to serve anybody. It's a very complete in its design, to really, give people the optimal chance of long-term success. And to piecemeal that out just because someone's going to say, oh, well, what would you do? Well, you want to find out what we do? Well, we can teach you that, but we're going to teach it to you in a way that's going to serve you the best.
Yeah.
So, I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. It's worth pointing out as well that like what we teach is very much do this, then do this, then do this, and there isn't any
Yeah.
sort of holes in it. It's like very, very concrete. Like we would have an answer for literally everything. Whereas I think books like this, the problem with them is they're so full of contradictions that it just becomes way more confusing. Because like basically having read this book, what you come to realize is that at one moment he's saying that the brain is malleable and due to neuroplasticity you can change and overcome addiction. But then like a minute later he's saying, well actually you're screwed if you're addicted because of this neuroscience that I've investigated here, or oh, you've never had a chance because this happened to you, blah blah blah. And then it's just like a bit, it's all very messy, really. It's just like confusing. There isn't any like do this, then do this, then do this with evidence of this actually working for anyone ever,
Yeah.
anywhere. So
Well, and of course, a state of confusion is the number one place that the addictive part of the mind wants to get a person into, the state of confusion and helplessness. And the more loopholes there are in the methodology or whatever in the information that's being conveyed in the book, that's just going to be really like the addictive part of the brain is going to be like, oh, I can think about this and maybe that and maybe and how do I, all of that. It's going to
mm,
feed it.
yeah, we had a client join us this week who said in his first message, did you notice that he said he'd spent 1,600 hours researching how to overcome porn addiction?
Yeah.
That's crazy. It's absolutely
Yeah,
mad.
I saw that. And I think that I watched a Gabor Maté YouTube where he was talking about being diagnosed OCD
Yeah, yeah. He talks, well, I think it was ADD or ADHD. He
or
talks about it in
ADHD,
this
one of
book.
the two, I think they have a lot of overlapping sort
Mm,
of qualities. But the thing is when that's addiction, that's just like not being able to take any control over your thinking, it's and all this stuff that's going to lend itself to more questioning and more confusion, and it's well, of course you're going to have a deficit in your attention span.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. And I think just in general, like labels can just make things worse. Like that's why
So
I don't
much worse.
believe and this is another thing I just really don't like about this book is the amount of times he calls people struggling with addiction addict. I know maybe me and you will call someone, oh, an addict now and then, but I just don't like it. Like the way he talks about it, it seems to me like it's this like fixed identity that someone
Yeah,
has, whereas I just completely
every day,
disagree with that. I see it as someone has addicted neural pathways, and
right
that is a
now.
temporary thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, right now, exactly.
100%. Yeah.
So I don't like that either. But anyway, back to the goods, because I mean personally, I think there's some good in this. I know you're kind of dismissing some of the goods, and rightfully
Yeah,
so,
yeah, yeah.
because ultimately it doesn't actually help people change their neural
I'll
pathways.
behave.
What's that? Sorry,
I said I'll behave.
you'll
I'll be
behave.
I'll be more positive. Like I was
Like
told at work last night.
you don't have to be more positive,
I
but
got to be less monotone, more positive. Sorry, you're gonna get me going squirrely. You better move on or I get squirrely.
all right, we'll carry
Okay.
on then.
Yeah.
So it says here there is a psychological fact that I believe provides a powerful incentive for people to cling to genetic theories. We human beings don't like feeling responsible. As individuals for our own actions, as parents for our children's hurts, or as a society for our many failings. Genetics, that neutral, impassive, impersonal handmaiden of nature, would absolve us of responsibility and of its ominous shadow, guilt. If genetics ruled our fate, we would not need to blame ourselves or anyone else. Genetic explanations take us off the hook because I think up until that point he'd been talking about genetics and how genetics can cause addiction, but then he just goes against that entirely to say that actually, as humans, we like to cling on to genetics because it kind of gives us a free pass to stay addicted.
Well, yeah, for sure. Genetics, because yeah, that's the thing. It's like if it's a genetic issue, then that's something that's going to happen to you. It's out of your control, right? It's in your genetics. So that but all of that you just said was so long, and I don't really understand what was the point of that being in the book again.
I think he's trying to get across that like it's not because of your genetics that you have an
Okay.
addiction. Um,
Okay, good. That if that's what all that said, then that's good. Yeah, it's not genetics. Well,
but
it's
like a
it's
minute
it
earlier in the book, he's saying it is genetics. Like he
what the hell
literally
is it? Genetics or not genetics?
it's
So,
just
the thing is,
okay.
the thing is, it comes down to the age-old question, nature, nurture. Is it nature? Is it nurture? To me, it's like it's nurture, because people learn addictions. And I mean, now, talk about nurturing addiction. Come on, the whole world is like, oh, you deserve a reward, all that crap. That's all nurture. Now, people are not born with it. Contrary
Yeah,
to popular belief, people got the obese gene. They just have more fat cells. No, they don't.
yeah, I agree.
Like, no, okay, well, if that's what he's saying, cool. But it sounds like you said he's contradicting himself.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's just a few moments earlier where, he's talking about how, for example, it's been demonstrated that both animals and humans who have experienced the stress of their mothers during pregnancy are far more likely to have disturbed stress control mechanisms long after birth, creating a risk factor for addiction. And then maternal stress during pregnancy can, for example, increase the offspring's sensitivity to alcohol. And, there's just like a catalogue of different ways in which he tries to use science to explain why someone could be more likely to be addicted due to genetics. But then at the end, as I say, he just kind of goes and does a U-turn on that and says that actually it's not a genetics, which again, and I'm trying to say that's a good point because I'm picking
Well, I
out the
have
good,
an addiction
but
because my mom was stressed out when I was in the womb.
yeah, it's a junkie thought, isn't it? Pretty obvious.
So it's in my genetics. I got something from my mom's stress. Well, and it's talking about stress too, which is just something
Yeah,
that needs to get left behind. People
yeah.
don't engage in addictions because they're stressed.
Need to do an 86 on that, Mary.
86, 86 it, man. Yeah. So yeah, and the thing is we can, oh, well, let's go back to her mom and then her mom, and let's go back to the
Hmm.
dinosaurs, man. See if we can figure out why people do this.
Yeah, yeah. All right, we'll go for some more good. I hope in this book we find at least one thing you're like, yeah, yeah, that's good. But we'll see. We'll see how we get on. It doesn't matter if we don't. All right. Succumbing to the common human urge to absolve ourselves of responsibility, our culture has too avidly embraced genetic fundamentalism. That leaves us far less empowered to deal either actively or proactively with the tragedy of addiction. We ignore the good news that nothing is irrevocably dictated by our genes and that therefore there is much we can do. So that's good, right?
Oh, yeah,
That's good.
there we go.
Good shit. Come on,
Good,
Gabba. Let's go.
good shit. Let's go, Gabor.
Come on.
Yeah,
All right, all
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Let's see what we got here then.
A lot of words
Oh
right
shit.
there. That's a lot
Um,
of big words.
yeah, I don't really know why I put this in green, but I wrote, okay. In effect, people, oh yeah, no, I know why. In effect, people become addicted to their own brain chemicals. You must love that, surely. You know this is all about brain chemicals and the emotional, psychological dependency on a mind's mood or to an experience.
Yeah, 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 that's it. Yeah, they do.
Yeah. But then he
Well, they change
says,
the way they feel because they want to do it and they do it. It changes the way they feel because it shoots off some brain chemicals.
yeah, but then he
Yeah.
says, when caught in the urgent fever of my compact disc hunt, for instance, it's that hit of dopamine I'm after. And this I'm a little bit unsure on really because I know we talk about dopamine a lot, like in society, we talk about dopamine a lot, but it's not really, you know, you want to really reframe that as like it's not dopamine you're after because one, I mean, dopamine is actually the release of a potential.
Mhm.
Anyway, we don't need to get into the neuroscience, but
Yeah,
basically, what you actually
yeah,
want is the temporary relief from the discomfort of
right.
withdrawal. Now, whether that is a release in dopamine in that moment because you're uncomfortable, sure, maybe
Yeah.
it is, but framing it as dopamine isn't useful in any way.
Because, ooh, get my dopamine. God, that's like this buzzy word now. Ooh, get my dopamine, get your
I
dopamine
know.
fix. It's like, okay. It's like they're normalizing dopamine release. Is like, well, that should just be, I don't know. I feel like it's irrelevant
Yeah,
personally.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think for some people listening, you know, just hearing that what people really want is this like brain chemical sort of release, like it's this psychological emotional dependency that can be
Yeah.
useful, especially with porn, because I think people can believe it's something to do with their sexual desires or, you know, there's this
Yeah.
intrinsic
Oh, I
problem with
see.
them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So what I'm
Just
saying is,
don't
yeah,
glamorize the dopamine,
yeah, yeah,
really, you know,
yeah, I agree. I agree.
because you can have dopamine release that's reasonable at reasonable times without having to suffer in an addiction.
Yeah, 100%. People talk about like dopamine detoxes nowadays, and it's like the least reasonable thing ever. It's just like insane. So it's not good.
I haven't heard that one, but that
Yeah,
doesn't surprise me.
yeah, it's not healthy. Okay, what else we got? That's good. It is becoming apparent that eating and drug disorders share a common neuroanatomic and neurochemical basis, conclude two experts on addiction and related disorders. So yeah, I think I must have highlighted that in green because I like that it's about, you know, neuroscience and that there is some neuroscience behind it in that this is caused by like what's going on in the brain, which I think is useful. But in terms of actually understanding the neuroscience, yeah, it's
Yeah.
not helpful in any way. Like
Yeah,
I
well, you're talking about food there, you know, and if they don't get down to like realizing that obesity is compulsive behavior with food that's coming from the brain,
mm,
I mean, that's just a train wreck happening
yeah,
everywhere with this obesity thing and the gastric bypass, treating all the obesity symptoms and all the diabetes, all of that is just, yeah, it's a brain thing,
yeah, yeah.
you know.
And that's good that he's acknowledging that, you know, eating and drugs is a brain thing going on. Because you've been saying this for like 35 plus years, right?
Yeah, but everyone's ignoring it. It's a body type.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
body type.
Mm, exactly. Um, okay. And then what we've got here. For example, very obese individuals score worse than substance abusers in the Iowa gambling test, a paradigm that also relies on the integrity of the right prefrontal cortex for execution. So, yeah, talking about how basically obesity is very similar to substance abuse in terms of the brain, what's going on there, which, yeah, definitely aligns with what
Yeah,
you've been saying for many years.
sure.
Okay, let's see what else good stuff we've got in this book.
Good stuff.
Everything a person can do is better done if there is no addictive attachment that pollutes it. For every addiction, no matter how benign or even laudable it seems from the outside, someone pays a price. Well, that is true. Someone does pay a
Yeah.
price indeed. Okay.
What? What about it?
Well, there's more about that,
So
but I think,
even so, if your addiction's not bothering you, it's probably still bothering somebody else.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Well, the thing is if it's bothering somebody else, then I would assume it bothers you to be bothering somebody else. And see, that's why, you know, anyone who comes in for addiction stuff, you know, and they talk about their partner or whoever being, you know, bothered by it. I'm like, would you be here if they didn't care? Would you be here if they weren't in your life? And if they say yes, great. If they say no, well then go have at your addiction, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
But most people, but if they want to get free, and it's like I try to get them to see how do you feel about your partner feeling really bad,
Mm,
because
mm.
that's the consequence they're paying. Otherwise, first time the partner pisses them off, they're going to go back to their addiction. I'll show you, right?
Yeah,
Junkie
yeah.
thinking 101.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And there is a bit in this book later on where he talks about autonomy, which I think is good,
Yeah.
because I do truly believe that you have to have like 100% autonomy if you want to overcome addiction. Like you can't, you're not going to get out of an addiction if it's relying on something else outside of yourself. Like ultimately, you are the only one who can get yourself out of addiction. Like nothing me or Mary ever says or anything like that. That is, we can't determine whether someone gets out of addiction or not. We can just give people tools and education, but it's 100% on you at the end of the day. Like that's just a fact.
Yeah.
So anyway, what we got here? Although it is commonplace to blame the current epidemic of obesity on junk food consumption and sedentary living, these are only the behavioral manifestations of a deeper psychological and social malaise. I guess I put that in there just to kind of get across
Yeah.
again, it's what's going on in the brain that's causing the obesity epidemic rather than what's
Yeah.
going on socially, like all the unhealthy food and shit like
That's why I say, wake the fuck up and listen to what Gabor just said.
that.
This is not about, I've been saying this shit for years. This is not
Yeah,
about sedentary lifestyle and junk food, people.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Gabor.
There we go.
There
See?
we go. Me and Gabor, we're like this.
Besties now. Besties after that.
We're besties.
Oh yeah, she loved that
Yeah.
one. All right, come on, let's go. Let's see what else we got here. The brain can never, as it were, feel that it's had enough, that it can relax and get on with other essential business. It's as if after a full meal you were left starving and had to immediately turn your efforts to procuring food again. This is about how, these addictions, what he says here actually, he says, addictions can never truly replace the life needs they temporarily displace. Okay, well, that's bullshit. But anyway, the next sentence
Yeah.
was
Thank you.
the false needs they serve, no matter how often they are gratified, cannot leave us fulfilled. Okay, really want to just delve into that word need. He uses this word all the freaking time.
Say
It does
the
my head
same
in.
thing.
I knew you were going to say the same, Mary, obviously, because our brain's like the same. But yeah, he uses this word all the time throughout the book. Needs, needs, needs. What you gotta understand is that the word need, if you have a look into like the research on the word need, it basically was created for like someone they need like water or they need food to
Shelter.
survive in certain situations, right? And
Yes.
if they don't have the thing that they need, they die. Now,
Yeah.
unless that word is being used in the context of them if they don't have the thing that they need, they're literally going to perish. You want to
Yeah.
eliminate that word from your vocabulary. That's the
Yeah.
only relevant use of the word need because humans nowadays always talk about unmet needs and all this stupid
Yeah.
bullshit when we
Yeah.
don't really have that many needs actually. We're
Right.
pretty good and all our needs are
Yeah.
basically being met in our modern society. But then you
Yeah.
have all this language about unmet needs and therefore that's why I'm looking at porn on the internet because
Yeah.
I'm lonely. It's like, no, 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 that's not why. Mary, want to take it away on that?
Well, I don't even know if there's that much more to say because addiction is not a need.
Yeah.
Acting on an addictive desire, I mean, you want to do that, but it's definitely not a need. But the thing is like you say, you use that language, I need to do this.
Mm.
And that's really common language now is people, like all the neurodiversity or the OCD or whatever is like, I need to have the things in my cupboard in a certain order. I need to fold my towels a certain way. I need this, I need that. It's like, no, you don't need that, you
Yeah.
know if you don't do that, if your soup cans are turned backwards in your cupboard, you're not going to die.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen, you know. So, and language is so important because those words they affect the way that you feel,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And
Exactly.
you want to act on the way you feel. So it's just really clear that up. But the thing is, there's all this unmet needs, you're unfulfilled, looking for all these reasons that you do it rather than breaking it down to the simple. Your brain's wired this way. We can change that. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the reason I did highlight this though was I did like the bit about how, you can never really relax and get on with other stuff. It's like once you've engaged in the behavior, you then turn your attention to engaging again. And that definitely rings true.
Oh, okay. So he's saying, I was wondering about that. So he's saying that you can't relax until you engage, but then
No,
you
no,
can't
he's
relax
saying
after you engage because you want to engage again. I would lose
Yeah, yeah.
the word relax out of the whole thing. Lose the word need because the thing, because total junkie thinking, glamorization. If I just do it, then I can relax
No, 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 that's not what
and
he's saying.
focus.
He's saying the opposite. He's saying what
Yeah,
you agree with, which is why it's the good
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Like,
I get
that's it.
that. But I
Yeah.
would say, why are we even bringing relax into it?
Because he's saying that you can't relax once you've done it once. You're going to want to do it again. It's not like the desire satiated, is what he's saying.
Right, so no peace of mind. Okay, that makes sense, but that's still, I mean, using the word relax. I mean, I know how he's using it or whatever, but it's basic junkie thinking too, the glamorization. If I just do it, then I can relax and get on with my other stuff. But thank you, Gabor, again. No, you're not going to relax. You're going to want to do it again.
Yeah, 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 exactly. So that's why it's good.
Junkie thinking is
Yeah,
thinking that giving into your addiction is you're gonna relax. No, you get temporary relief from the discomfort of withdrawal for a moment.
yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. Actually, I see what you
Yeah,
mean
yeah,
now. Like what you're saying is even to call it relax in the first place was
yeah,
wrong from him because it's
yeah.
actually the temporary relief from the discomfort of withdrawal. Yeah.
Right.
And it's the
Very
same with
different.
all the dopamine shit and all the other reasons that he says people engage in compulsive behaviors.
Yeah,
It's like he misses out the actual reason people engage in compulsivity, which is to get out of the temporary discomfort of withdrawal, which is uncomfortable. Like he just
yeah.
misses that throughout the whole book, which is why the
Which
whole
we
book's a mess.
cover. Not what you're gonna get out of it. It's what you're trying to get out of.
Hmm.
You're gonna get out of the discomfort of withdrawal for a moment and be back in the addiction.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
this
You're
is
not gonna get anything out of it other than more hell.
this is the other problem with this book, though, is that just throughout it, there's so many different explanations as to why people engage in compulsivity. But the needs, like I say need, but really, like if you want to overcome an addiction, in my opinion, there has to be only one isolated reason. Otherwise, the brain, the addictive part of the brain, is always going to look for these different reasons. If you break it down, the only
Yeah,
reason is to get out of the discomfort of withdrawal because of the psychological emotional dependency
yeah.
on a mind, mood altering experience. You have addictive neural pathways right now. This is a temporary brain wiring that can be changed. So
Yeah,
important.
I mean, if there are reasons that maybe contributed to you getting addicted, okay, but it's not going to do any good to focus on them.
Yeah.
Like maybe you had trauma, childhood, whatever, you had a stressful day, whatever, blah, 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 triggered you to want to engage in your compulsive behavior, but it's still the same thing.
Mm.
It's like, doesn't matter what the reason is.
Yeah.
Are you going to change the brain in that moment so you can
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
beyond that behavior?
Absolutely. That's it.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Okay, so the addict is never satisfied. His spiritual and emotional condition is one of impoverishment, no matter how much he achieves, acquires, or possesses.
That's just bullshit. Because look at a lot of our guys, there's some very, very spiritual human beings that are very fulfilled spiritually. They don't have some deficit that makes them want to watch porn.
Mm,
I mean, look at some of our guys. The way
mm,
they're more, spiritually fulfilled than I am. I mean, I worship the worms in my garden, whatever, but it's like they're very, spiritually involved in their communities. And, it's not about a deficit that they're trying to fulfill these needs. And that's why they do this. It's more looking for why rather than
mm.
how we change this.
Yeah, yeah. I think what I liked about that is the point about the addict is never satisfied and how it's
Oh yeah.
actually looking at addiction and going, this is a problem, like, and actually facing the reality of how bad the problem is. But I do completely agree with you.
Yeah.
Our clients are probably a lot more spiritually sort of invested mentally than the average person. A lot of people we work with are very close to religion and actually come to us because they want to get closer to God, or they're reading a lot of books that are to do with, spirituality. So
For
yeah, I
sure.
know what you mean
So
for
you
sure.
should you should warn me, are these green, yellow, or red? Because it's
No.
like it'd be like the Zoom diet program, green, yellow, and red foods. So but some of them maybe they'll be green and then they'll get them to be a little bit yellow and then maybe they turn red. But yes, addiction is insatiable. Yes.
Hmm.
That's so true. But it's not insatiable because you have a deficit in your spirituality. It's insatiable because you build a tolerance when you have an addiction.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you're never going to
Absolutely.
want less. You want more, but you're not going to want less and be like, oh, I'm good with this. I'm just going to do it once every 6 months. I'm going to go watch them born. No, it's not going to work like that. You
Mm-hmm.
want more, 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 more. And that's why like the guys get into the really funky stuff, that
Yeah.
tolerance cycle, right?
Yeah. Tolerance cycle's pretty wild. Leads to some crazy places, as I've experienced firsthand.
Yeah, well, and then they
Um,
could also
yeah.
be like, okay, so maybe it's because I'm not spiritual enough.
Mm.
I'm a pervert or something rather. Nope, nope, I have an addiction. I build a tolerance. And then the extreme stuff is like when someone, has a full-on food binge, they've ordered Grubhub 17 times in one night. It's like the same tolerance, except with porn, you go to like extreme content.
Yeah. Exactly
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah. And just FYI, all of these still are green.
Oh,
Even
okay.
a lot of them are not going down too well. But reading
Green
them
means
back,
go.
I yeah. What are you gonna say there?
I said green means go.
Green means go. Well, we've got loads more green to get through. And honestly, if you think these green ones are bad, just wait till we get onto the junkie thoughts and the
Uh,
examples. You are gonna go crazy. You actually are. You're gonna be like, what on earth has actually gone on in this book? Like, it's pretty ludicrous, the shit that's said.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But anyway, so addicts respond with rage towards anyone who tries to deprive them of their drug. Big word there, deprive, which is why I put it in green. A rage that's fueled by intense frustration. I have witnessed that rage in opiate seekers and I've experienced it personally when, for example, my wife tried to stand in the way of my compulsive compact disc buying because this guy's addicted to buying discs. But anyway, yeah, just it's good there that he recognizes, feelings of deprivation very loosely. He doesn't talk about how to get out of them. And he also sees this as people in an addiction responding to someone trying to deprive them of something, whereas we would frame that entirely as well, actually, you're never deprived. Like, no one can take your choice away from you. Like, your wife can't stand in the way of you and stop you from buying some discs.
Yeah.
You could just leave
Right.
your
Yeah.
wife
Go
and buy
buy
some
the damn
discs.
disc, or if
Yeah.
she doesn't like it, she can divorce you.
Yeah, the deprivation is going on internally in your brain. It's not going on
Yeah.
externally, which is really important to
Well, he
recognize.
talks about rage, which is like, the extreme of deprivation thinking, the feelings that are created by deprivation thinking. That's why it's so critical to address that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I thought, it's good that at least he's brought up the word deprivation because that's like one of the biggest things of everything we teach, really.
Well, a lot of people bring it up, but they don't know how to deal with it. So,
Yeah, including Gabor Maté, unfortunately.
right. Yeah.
Right. One of the main tasks of the mind is to fight or remove the emotional pain, which is one of the reasons for its incessant activity. But all it can ever achieve is to cover it up temporarily. In fact, the harder the mind struggles to get rid of the pain, the greater the pain. So writes Eckhart Tolle. And I thought that quote was pretty good because, the word temporarily is in there. And it's talking about how, from our perspective, we would say, well, yeah, the addicted part of the mind's 24/7 wanting you to engage in your compulsive behavior to get you out of the pain of the discomfort of withdrawal, right? Any thoughts from you on that, Mary?
Well, I don't know that it's actual pain. I guess it's how you want to define pain. But the thing is, um, if you do it, pain versus discomfort, that's it's different. Pain is something you definitely go if you're in pain, want to get out of that, rather than it's really recognizing it as this is uncomfortable, you know. But I don't think it's really helpful to describe it as pain and it's emotional pain. So then it's kind of, is that what that said? And it's kind of
Yeah.
like referring back to trauma and all this stuff. You have this emotional pain, and that's why you engage in your addictive behavior.
Mm.
Rather than engaging in an addictive behavior, not have an effective way to stop causes emotional pain.
Yeah, yeah. And also, when we talk about emotions as well, it's really, really powerful to have the context behind how emotions are created and how they're created by your thoughts, which again, if we just look at emotions in isolation without that context of how our thoughts create our feelings, we're not actually in this empowered mental stance of knowing that actually we can change how we feel a lot of the time by changing how we think about things and how we choose to respond.
Yeah.
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 All
True.
right, cool. Viewed honestly, much of our culture is geared towards enticing us away from ourselves into externally directed activity, into diverting the mind from ennui and distress. I don't really know how to pronounce that word, do you?
Ennui, I think it means just feeling puzzled, doesn't it? Ennui, Ennui.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's more of like I don't know actually, to be
Yeah, I
honest.
think
I
I have the
thought it
wrong
was
definition. Oh, a feeling of listlessness and dissatisfaction arising from a lack of occupation or excitement. Okay, so say
mm,
the sentence again now that we know that ennui means.
yeah. Viewed honestly, much of our culture is geared towards enticing us away from ourselves into externally directed activity, into diverting the mind from ennui and distress.
Okay, so yeah, that shit sells, people want to make money and they sell
Yeah.
you stuff, make you feel better, or whatever, make you feel whatever. It's like, but you're not helpless to participate or engage or buy or whatever or do.
Mm,
I
mm,
mean, it's encouraged, yeah. It's normalized, yeah. It's like the tidal wave of normalizing, just do whatever to be excited all the time and have. You said to me recently, um, I just, accepting that life isn't always a bowl of cherries. It's just
mm.
like it's a lot easier to deal with life when you don't expect to be all happy and you know never have listlessness or dissatisfaction or whatever. So you got to go get, go do, go buy, go Amazon, whatever. You're not helpless for that stuff. They can just put out all the shit they want in front of my face, and I buy very little that I don't need.
Nah, Mary, give me that fake smile again. This one. You gotta give me that, right? It's like your people recently that you're telling me about, but
Yeah,
yeah,
be
yeah.
more positive. But I told him flat out, he's like, well, do you feel like you're negative about certain things? Well, I'm like, yeah, when there's shit going down that's not cool. Yeah, I'm negative
Yeah,
about it, but what I'm not supposed to say that?
yeah,
Whatever.
yeah.
Not in my world.
No, no,
So
no. Honestly, yeah, and you're right, like what I was saying to you recently about I think nowadays, and this is definitely true for this book, is kind of this pervasive idea that we've got to be happy all the time. And it's like,
yeah,
why? Like, that's just
yeah,
why would we be happy all the time? I mean, life is freaking hard sometimes. And like some of my closest best friends who I've been friends with for like way longer than, anyone, like sort of half my life sort of stuff since I was like super, super young, like 12, 13. Some of those closest friends, like myself, have kind of gone through some quite tough shit in life, and it's kind of just how we respond to it that matters. And we'll talk about that stuff, but our mental stance, our attitude is more just like, well, yeah, life is hard sometimes, it is difficult, and there's people out there who have been through way, way, way worse than me, and I'm sure it is really, really difficult. And that's true for some of my closest mates. They've been through way tougher things in life than myself. And I'm very, very lucky and grateful. But it's kind of how they respond to it, which is make or break. And that's the main thing, really. So,
yep. And how you respond to something you want, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Right then. But I did like that bit because the reason I liked about that is because I do agree that the external world right now is going insane and everyone is competing
For
for your
real.
attention and for your money and to sell you shit that you definitely, definitely don't need, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's things that really there's no purpose in them, at all. Like things like Lamborghinis and Ferraris and just random shit now. It's like just always flashed in our face. And even online nowadays, I mean, there's like guys who will, showcase these glamorous lifestyles where they're surrounded by half-naked women all the time. People like Andrew Tate. It's completely
Yeah.
disgusting. It's all despicable, and they
So
think
despicable.
that's what is good. It's not, living in alignment with truth and your values is what makes you a good person, in my opinion. But
What about like the red carpet? All these award shows and all these celebrities and stuff, and these like that what these dresses that they're wearing that are just like these gigantic things, and like where's that going to go?
mm,
In the landfill eventually? I mean, it's nuts.
yeah, it's a sick society for
It
sure.
really is. Yeah.
But at the same time, I think there's a lot of good right now in the world, a lot of
Yep.
opportunities. I mean, just the fact that we've got this opportunity to work with these people from all over the world, and we can create this video so easily online, and we can just
Yes.
share it. There's so much good as well. So I don't want it to all be like negative or anything, because personally,
Go humanity. Go.
yeah. Like personally, I'm not,
I
I'm
mean,
not
I
feeling
see I see cool
depressed.
stuff like all the time. Like I just know I think it was Netherlands actually. We got a lot of cool clients from Netherlands,
Yeah.
right? Where they have like bricks that grow moss, right? So they have these built, storefronts and buildings with bricks that are growing moss that like purify the air, and and you know what they would do here?
Mm,
They would poison that shit. I mean, I
yeah.
have moss growing around in my yard in the spring when it's rainy and stuff. It's so beautiful, and people are like, "Oh, moss! You gotta put the moss poison on there," and I'm just like, "Why would you do that?" But there's people doing cool shit,
Yeah. Yeah.
like that, or like and it's always other countries, of course. Someone's like, there's a grocery store that's actually growing the produce on the roof.
Nice. That's really
The
cool.
cool stuff. I mean, there's so
Yeah.
many opportunities to do really cool, smart stuff. If people would just take more advantage of that, that'd be great. But
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
usually don't make changes until they're really negatively affected themselves. So there's a lot of really good humans out there. So hopefully they're gonna step up, right?
Hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what else we got here. So, freedom in society is gauged by our success in getting what we want and conditioned by status and power, by race, class, and gender. That, by the way, I kind of hate. But anyway, he then goes on to say, in the internal world of the psyche, however, freedom means something very different. It is the ability to opt for our long-term physical and spiritual well-being as opposed to our immediate urges. Absent that ability, any talk of free will or choice becomes nearly meaningless.
I lost it.
So basically, what he's saying is the same
Yeah.
as what we say about, you get to choose between temporary discomfort and long-term happiness, freedom, peace of mind, or
Yeah.
you choose, temporary relief and long-term suffering. I mean, that's how we word things. I feel like what he's saying here is kind of similar to that. He's talking about how in our brain, real freedom is actually about having the ability, and this is what I believe as well. It's like learning the beyond compulsion method is a skill. It's an ability.
Yeah.
That's why we have a sequence of training. It is the
Yeah.
ability to opt for our long-term physical and spiritual well-being as opposed to our immediate urges. So I think that's quite in
What was
alignment
the
with what
last
we talk about.
sentence though?
The last sentence is he's basically saying that unless we have that ability to opt for that long-term physical and spiritual well-being, then we don't have choice, we don't have free will. Because he says, absent that ability, any talk of free will or choice becomes nearly meaningless. Um,
Right, yeah.
so
Well,
yeah,
yeah, because if you don't have a tool, if you
Mm.
have this going on and you're told to just go meditate or run around the block and get healthy and go to the gym, well, of course, it's not about will, it's not about having the will to do it. It's about having a tool.
yeah,
Yeah, you can have the will to move the boulder with your shoulder, but I'm gonna do it, but then it rolls over and smashes you, when you can use
Mm.
pry bars and levers.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I thought
That's
you'd like that one, and that one was in green. So
Oh, it's green.
overall, yeah,
Good.
you didn't mind that one too much, did you?
Go green.
There we go.
Green means go.
All right, we've got some more greens. We don't have too many more, probably about five or six more green ones, and then we'll get on to the dark side of the
Yeah,
inversion.
we may have to
Doesn't
split it
matter.
into two.
We'll see. We'll see. All right.
Yeah, because you're just gonna get hot in your flat.
I'm absolutely roasting.
I need some water too.
I'm sweating like I'm in a sauna. Let's have a break after we get through the greens. I'm gonna get some water, go to the toilet, and then we'll come back and get through the other side. But for now, let's just
Okay,
carry
good
on with a
idea.
few more greens. All right.
Maybe with more water and a cold pain pillow on my lap, I can carry on. Yeah.
Oh yes, Mary. You know what we're talking about here.
Oh,
There
you
we
got your
go.
pain pillow. I love that
Yeah.
fabric.
I've got my pain pillow just
My
on the
favorite.
floor, but it's kind of warmed up now because I just had my shoes on it. My toes on it because obviously my feet are out. But
Was
yeah, I
it
was just
frozen? Was it cold to begin with?
yeah. It was in the
Nice.
freezer, but now it's well warm because it's like a sauna in here. I don't even need my sauna subscription anymore. It's that hot in here. It's horrible. I
Yeah,
got a sun.
I can see the sun
Nah,
coming in
nah,
on you. Yeah, so
it's grim. But
we'll
anyway,
see. We'll take a break and then we'll see how we feel. But let's finish the green
yeah.
first, eh?
For sure, for sure. And for anyone listening, by the way, that green green pain pillow that I just showed the camera for anyone watching as well. Mary sent that over to me. Mary creates pain pillows, and yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay,
Yeah.
anyway,
There's a whole bunch of them right there in the background.
yeah, that's awesome. Feels
Yeah,
like I've got a
look at that over there. Yeah.
bit of Portland with me down here. So, the distinction between automatic mechanism and conscious free will may be illustrated by the difference between punching a wall with your fist in a fit of reactive rage and mindfully saying to yourself, I have so much anger in me. I really want to punch this wall right now. Now, that I would say that quote there where he says, I mean, obviously, we don't like the mindfully part or reactive rage, but the bit where he says about, okay, you want to punch your wall, if you can say to yourself, I have so much anger in me, I really want to punch this wall right now, you know, or and then he says, or even more consciously, my mind tells me I should punch the wall. That right there is probably the most similar thing we've got to our method. Would you not agree?
Sure. Yeah, but then what?
Well, yeah, I've
Well, how do
got,
you keep yourself from punching the wall?
yeah, I mean, you're
Acknowledging
right.
it isn't going to be enough, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, you need the next part, of course. You need the next part about deprivation and then so
Follow
on and
the.
so on. But yeah,
Mm,
but I just liked how at least there, we've got an acknowledgement that what we need to do if we want freedom, and I say the word need, it's only if we need
yeah.
the mental freedom, um, is to actually be aware of what we want to do. That is the starting place
Yeah.
of everything we teach, is getting people out of that resistance. It's so, so essential. Okay, anyway, and then he says, we may say then that in the world of the psyche, freedom is a relative concept. The power to choose exists only when our automatic mental mechanisms are subject to those brain systems that are able to maintain conscious awareness. Okay, there's a lot of words there, but I
That's
think
what I was
he's
going to say. You lost
yeah.
me again.
Yeah, let's just move on to another one. I'm getting
Yeah.
pretty hot. We'll get through a few more. Okay. I find it funny how me and you just don't care about being like, yep, too complicated for us. Like, not even
Okay.
complicated, just not useful. Like, that's the thing. It just
Well,
doesn't.
it's sort of mental masturbation in my view.
Yeah, there's a lot of mental masturbation in
Let
this
me
book for
see
sure.
how complicated I can say something. It just that doesn't require being that complicated.
Mm, for sure. Okay, so here he's talking a bit more about his feelings of deprivation, which I think is good. Like awareness
Okay?
of deprivation is useful. He says, finally, whenever I have felt wooden or alienated in the intimate areas of life, I've seen myself as deprived rather than owning the reality that I create the sense of deprivation internally.
Oh, that's good.
That's good. Yeah. But how does he create those feelings of deprivation internally? That's what he doesn't know, is that his thoughts create feelings. He's telling himself he can't do certain things and he's creating those
It sounds like
feelings
he's
of
feeling
deprivation mentally.
deprived, but doesn't know how to change that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Man, Gabor Maté would freaking love our program so much if he ever
right.
found it. Honestly, it would
Yeah.
seriously help him. Okay, now we've got a long quote here. Okay, yeah, so I'll just read out the last bit. It says, fortunately for human beings, the mind is more than the workings of our automatic brain mechanisms, and it turns out the brain itself can develop throughout a lifetime, which, aligns with what we know about neuroplasticity, which is good. So it's basically saying, yep, the brain can change itself. Well, it can change if you put in the work, of course, and you actively, proactively change your own brain. So that's good.
Green means go.
Yeah, that's it. Okay.
All
So
right.
what we got here, the brain remodels itself throughout life, and that it retains the capacity to change itself as the result not only of passively experienced factors such as enriched environments, but also of changes in the ways we behave and the ways we think. Finally, something about how we actually
Yeah.
think influencing the brain. Perfect.
But
So
it starts out with changing your environment and your quality of life and blah, blah, blah. And then somehow it's going to just change. No.
yeah, yeah. This is the thing as well, like that's what I mean about these contradictions. Like, if you want to overcome addiction, two things that like contradict each other, it's not going to help you. It's not going to help your brain. We have to break it down to like one thing a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly some things that are simultaneously true. Like, you want to do it, you want to stop, but
Yeah.
it's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about what
Yeah.
actually changes the brain.
Yes.
Okay. Now then. Given that addiction is all about running from difficult emotions, well, that's okay, or hanging on to enticing ones, bare attention has the potential to dissolve the very motivations that drive the addicted mind. Okay, I actually don't agree with that. I don't know why I highlight that in green. Um, any
Oh,
thoughts
is
on
that
that?
say it again? It's just so it's so much. It's
It's quite wordy, isn't it?
when you were reading this and you messaged me and said your brain was hurting, or
Yeah.
maybe that was something else you were doing, but
No, it was this. Yeah.
this hurts my brain. But say that again because I caught part of it.
Reading this, like honestly, was horrendous for my brain. I really did not enjoy reading it. It was so confusing and like just so
Oh
many
my God.
contradictions.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was talking about given that addiction is all about running from difficult emotions or hanging on to enticing ones, bare
Okay.
attention.
Stop so I can
Yeah,
absorb it a little at
yeah.
a time. So it's running from difficult emotions to enticing ones.
Or
So
hanging
now
on to enticing
we're
ones.
say it's positive to go to the addiction, and the reason you do it is because you have difficult emotions. So you just have these emotional problems. This is a thing you have. You got to go deal with her. Go to therapy. Go to blah, 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 blah. Then you deal with your emotions, and somehow then you're gonna. No, it's just too much glamorizing and too much pointing at emotions being the reason you want to do it.
Mm, agreed. It's actually a temporary relief from the discomfort of withdrawal, which you
Thank
want.
you. Yes.
Okay. So, and oh, right, I think maybe the bit in green was the part at the end where it says, a neglected child may be helpless, but the damage comes if he acquires the defining belief that helplessness is his real and permanent state in the world. So this is the thing though, is like throughout the whole book he talks about traumas causing addiction, but then here he's basically saying that it only becomes your permanent state in the world if you have this belief of helplessness and you stay in that belief pattern. Whereas what we do is we literally
Yeah.
transform people's beliefs so that they can get out of helplessness, which may have been
Right.
acquired when they were young. Trauma may have led to the helplessness to begin with, but how do you get out of the helplessness? Well, you change how you
Well, and
think.
now, and then everything in the world is validating the helplessness with all the labels and all of this stuff. So, but, again, how,
Mm,
how you get, if you're saying that if they get in this state of helplessness, that they're gonna stay stuck, whatever, how are you gonna get them out?
yeah,
That's what we work to, I mean, constantly. We're pulling the people out of helplessness, but that's created by their own thinking and show them exactly how that's happening
yeah,
and how to get out of it.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm talking about
yeah, yeah,
identity
yeah.
there.
Helplessness is a big problem. We know this. It's a big problem, but without a how to, you're coming against the tidal wave of everything, validating it. You got to have a good, strong how to tool to get out of it and to recognize the tricky ways that the addictive part of the mind will get you into that state of helplessness.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and even just knowing that it comes from the addicted part of the mind and that's a
yeah,
tactic to get you into helplessness, to get you to engage in your compulsive behavior, just that
yep,
alone is so important.
yep.
Okay. But yeah, talking about identity, it does say all too often these ill-conditioned implicit beliefs become self-fulfilling prophecies in our lives. So yeah, I think what you're saying there is, if you have the belief that you're helpless, then you act on that helplessness. So
Yeah.
it's important
Well,
to
with
change that belief.
self-fulfilling prophecy, that again is like not taking responsibility. It's just, oh, this is what I'm doing to myself
Yeah.
because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's another kind of a label thing, you know. This
Mm,
is just what I do. I always sabotage myself. You hear that all
mm.
the time. It's like, no, maybe you want to, but if you can identify how you're doing that, then you can change that.
Yeah, yeah, you are right.
Your
Definitely.
self-fulfilling prophecy, you know.
Yeah. This bit's quite interesting because we talk about how meditation and mindfulness isn't going to get you out of an addiction. And he says, mindfulness practice will not by itself cool the addiction heated mind, what we call the addicted part of the mind. But addicted or not, it is an invaluable adjunct to whatever else we do. So, I mean, yeah, meditation, mindfulness, I'm sure it is helpful, but I'm glad he's kind of aware that it's not going to get
Yeah.
you out of an addiction.
Yeah, it's good. So, okay, so it's not, right? So, why is everyone prescribing it
Mm,
for addiction treatment? Why is literally almost like every book you pick up is going to be all the relating and all the, oh, we're all doing this, we're all struggling, and get to what then meditate,
mm.
be mindful, do deep breathing. It's I mean, if he's the big expert and he's saying it doesn't work, why does everyone keep prescribing it? And I think that actually I've heard him in his podcast tell people to meditate.
Yeah, yeah. It's
You
just
know,
contradiction after contradiction, to be honest with you.
if
Um,
you
he then has like a four-step model to actually deal with this problem. And I actually think some of these steps are quite good, but again, they just contradict a lot of the stuff he says earlier on in the book. And it was actually reading this four-step model which made me really, really deep in my understanding of why it's so essential that we have a sequence to our training program so that people don't just use the script without the training phases because like let's say someone were to just use the script without understanding junky thoughts, the addictive part of the mind, how it all works, you're not even going to have the awareness when you have a compulsive desire. So our scripts would be utterly useless and would actually make things way worse for someone if they tried to use the script without having the education first. Because, this four-step model, because he's just said so much bullshit already, it kind of means that when you get up to this four-step model, it doesn't it's not very useful basically because it contradicts some of the stuff he's said earlier on. Also, some of the stuff in the four-step model is pretty terrible as well. But there's some things that are good about it. And the first step is you label the addictive thought or urge exactly for what it is, not mistaking it for reality. And that's kind of similar to what we do, get connected to the neural pathway of compulsive desire, right?
not mistake it for reality. What does that mean?
That's a good point.
I mean, when you have a compulsive desire, that shit's real.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like the difference between the addictive part of the mind and the rational mind is what we'd call it.
It's like
But
it's real.
yeah. And then he
Okay.
talks about
Okay.
in step
Yeah.
two, very clearly state where that urge originated in neurological circuits that were programmed into your brain long ago when you were a child. So what he's saying there is a bit confusing because he then goes on to like ask yourself all these random questions about where the sort of neural pathway is coming from, which is where it gets really, really complicated and confusing for people. But
Oh,
what he's saying is, accept and acknowledge that this is a brain wiring that happened to you when you were younger, which I agree with again, which is good.
that's good.
Yeah.
But there doesn't need to be anything more said about it.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
No
And
matter when
then
it started, you want to change it now or not, you know?
yeah, and then in step three, I think this is where it goes wrong actually, because he says rather than engage in the addictive activity, find something else to do. Your initial goal is modest. Buy yourself just 15 minutes. Choose something that you enjoy and that will keep you active, preferably something healthy and creative, but anything that will phase you without causing greater harm. And this is the first one I've got in pink while in red. This is the first junkie thought I've got in the book, and it's only because we're in the four-step model. But this is where it goes completely wrong because how can you say like let's get into the neural pathway of compulsive desire and then suddenly you're running away from it in step three like that's where everyone's going wrong, this idea that you can just run away from the discomfort because you don't want to feel any discomfort and do something fun and enjoyable. Addiction's not fun and
Go do
enjoyable.
something fun and enjoyable. You're still going to have the compulsive desire.
Yeah.
And the thing is it's like, oh, that seems all fun and innocent, but then you just go get addicted to something else. Go do something fun. Go to
Yeah.
the donut shop, you know,
Yeah. Healthy,
whatever.
creative, but I mean,
Just
you can.
it's just I keep thinking of the teacher on Charlie Brown, you know. Wah, 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 wah.
Yeah, not ideal. But then in step four,
So what's step four?
he talks about something similar to the remember letter, which is revalue, remind yourself why you've gone to all of this trouble. The more clearly you see how things are, the more liberated you will be. So it's, acknowledging the harm that the addiction causes you.
You can document it all you want, but if you're going to run away from the desire by going and doing something that's fun or whatever, you
Yeah.
know, you're not going to change it.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
then, he's talking about assigning its proper value, that's less than nothing, which is true. But then he says, what has this addictive urge done for me? You will ask. And then but that's just an unanswerable question, which is going to get you into a right mental, tornado.
What has the
Um,
addictive urge done for me?
yeah, but then he's saying like, it's caused me to spend money heedlessly or to stuff myself when I wasn't hungry or to be absent from the ones I love or to expend my energies or activities I later regretted. But the thing is, if you ask yourself in that moment what the addictive urge has done for you, then the addictive part of the mind is going to take control because in that addictive moment, it's the addictive part of the mind doing the talking. That's why it needs to be a pre-prepared plan in that moment.
Yeah, yeah. That's what
All
it's
right.
done for me. It's like then it'll start glamorizing it, you know? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not really helpful.
And then step five is about like creating the life you do want. But that's going to be very hard if you're still in an addiction, of course. So,
Yeah,
that's not the best.
of course.
Okay, there's still a few more good things, but do you reckon we have a little break now? Because I really need the toilet and I want to put on a different t-shirt as well, because I'm too hot.
Yeah, I'm gonna get some water too. So,
Cool.
yep, put us
Speak to
on
you in a
hold.
minute. All right, we just got a few more good ones left. So, yeah, let's see what we've got here. Nothing evokes resistance more effectively than someone forbidding us to do something, even when the prohibition comes from ourselves. The frustration and resistance induced by abstinence in one area often leads to the addiction process erupting somewhere else. I think we completely agree with that. What wouldn't you say so, Mary?
The addiction process erupting somewhere else.
Well, yeah, maybe not that part, but the bit about, if you try and resist something, it just makes you sort of want to do it more, like it causes more of a problem. And also
Yeah,
the bit,
yeah, of
yeah,
course. That's kind of like common knowledge now, though.
I don't know
People
if
know
it
that, but
is.
they don't know how to change that, right?
Mm.
So, and then erupting somewhere else. It's like an eruption. When is the last time that anyone was in control of that? Hello, I live in the Pacific Northwest. Everybody knows about Mount St. Helens erupting. You know, something erupts. It's like
Mm.
that's out of everybody's control. You know, it's just like erupting. Like, I mean, maybe just using it like means it's going to pop up, but without very, very specific, tools, methodology to deal with where that addiction tries to erupt somewhere else. That's why when we work with the guys, we get everything on the radar that could potentially become a compulsive behavior for them. So they don't have to fall prey to that. Substitution, detour to disaster. We call it that for a reason,
Yeah.
you know? So yeah,
Mm.
but erupting, it's just language, that's not helpful.
Yeah, we're gonna get a lot more language that isn't helpful soon. I think as well, the thing is like you gotta understand addiction for what it is and understand that addiction is any behavior you want to stop. It's not just like one isolated thing. So to think that you've like solved addiction somehow by stopping one compulsive behavior, but then you just go and choose to engage in a different compulsive behavior,
Yeah,
that's not stopping addiction to begin with anyway. That's just staying in an addiction and substituting.
yeah.
Okay. I like this bit because he's talking about telling the truth to people. It's not going to get you free of addiction, sure. Obviously, it's not. But he says, my advice to anyone with addictive behaviors is to begin telling the truth. If you're not ready to drop the behavior, and obviously there's language there which isn't useful, then choose it openly. Okay. Tell your spouse or friends what you are doing. Keep keep it in the daylight. At the very least, do not compound your inner shame by lying. Better you should look bad in the eyes of others than to sink further in your own estimation. You didn't like that one?
I just don't even know where to start. I should be taking notes so I can address each thing, you know.
Mm,
Can you give me like the first 8 words? You know, the first, like, let's put some commas or something in there, M dashes or something. So what's the first thing you said?
My
Because
advice, my advice to anyone with addictive behaviors is to begin telling the truth.
okay, so begin telling the truth. Um, okay, yeah, to other people.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, maybe get honest with yourself, you know. That's probably a good start.
Mm,
Well, telling other people, you know, that's more like accountability partners and, you
yeah.
know, apps or whatever. And it's like that's not going to help you.
Mm,
Not going to helping telling other people, is that going to give you more pressure? Oh my God, I've told them that and now I can't do it because they know and all that. Then what's the next piece of the sentence?
if you're not ready to drop the behavior, then choose it openly.
Okay, yeah, choose it openly. Well, okay, the basic dilemma. You want to do it, you want to stop. You want to do it, you want to that those both of those things have a time limit on being able to deny them. You can't deny them. You're not going to choose it openly. If you already have a problem with it, you want to stop doing it. You know, acknowledge that you want both. You're not going to choose it openly. That's not
Mm,
going to happen. You never, if you're already trying to stop a behavior because it's causing you problems, you're not all of a sudden become happy and content with it and choose it openly. Just be open, man.
mm. Now you can
No.
start to see like why society is such a mess. Because this guy, if you look online, he is like genuinely one of the top like 10 most well-known
Oh,
people for addiction recovery. And this again is a quote for me, which I thought was one of the good parts of this book, because I think it is good to tell the truth, and I think it is better that you look bad in the eyes of others than to sink further in your own estimation of yourself. However, I do completely agree with you that this isn't going to help you overcome an addiction at all. But I think it's good to tell the truth because it can almost make the consequences more real, so that you're more willing to make a change. Because if you
I
tell
see
someone
that
and
perspective.
I think the consequences would be worse if you told someone, and I think that's a good thing because it's possible to get out of this. So you want to
Yeah,
face
it
the
can work
reality.
both ways though. It can cause feelings of
Mm.
deprivation for sure.
Yeah,
And but the thing is it's like, you know, I guess if shame will motivate you, you know, and then it could be start to point you in the right direction. Yeah.
maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Green beans
Um,
go.
okay, there's a lot of rubbish on that one. I think this may just be, yeah, this is the last good one. We'll go for the last good one, in my opinion. Oh my God, I got so many good ones here. Um, that we've gone through, and most of them, as we've dissected them, we've discovered that actually none of them are really, very few of them are actually that great. But anyway, it says here, blah blah blah. As the famed stress researcher Dr. Bruce McEwen has pointed out, a key determining factor triggering the stress response is the way a person perceives the situation. Now, obviously, Mary, we both know stress does not cause addiction. People in addiction are very, very stressed. But here's the bit that I think I quite liked. We ourselves give events their meaning depending on our personal histories, temperament, physical condition, and state of mind at the moment we experience them. Thus, the degree to which we're stressed may depend less on external circumstances than on how well we are able to take care of ourselves physically and emotionally. The reason I like that is because I do believe it's up to us to change our own thinking so that we can deal with what someone may perceive as a stressful situation in an appropriate way and therefore not actually be stressed out by it. Any thoughts on that from your perspective?
No. it's just like so much. Okay, if this guy was just a philosopher, you know, rather than the addiction guru, maybe some of that stuff is useful, you
Mm,
know, but I can't even retain it really. I mean,
yeah.
it just is I can't I don't even know what you just said.
Yeah, yeah. It's like your point is that there's just like a load of random science that is collected from all these different random people, put it into a book on addiction and sold it and made millions. But like none of it, or very little of it, actually has much to do with how to actually overcome addiction, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I'm just like I literally I'm trying to retain
Mm.
and like comment, but that last thing was just like so blah blah blah. It's the teacher Charlie Brown again. Anyway, what's the next one? Maybe that one I
Well,
can bite into.
we're good. We're good now. Like we've gone through all the good ones. Now we can actually get into some examples of how Gabor Maté has been in an addiction. We can go through that, and then we can talk about the language that's led to him being in addiction in more detail. Now, as I say, I have massive, massive respect for Gabor Maté in terms of him coming forward and sharing his personal stories. I know it's hard. I've done it myself. I've talked about watching sissy porn or freaking femdom porn and pretty crazy porn addiction sort of stories I've shared, and I'm very open about it personally because
Yeah,
I don't I don't see it as anything to do with really who I am because I just know I had a brain wiring at that point in time. I've changed those neural pathways now, so couldn't really care much less.
yeah,
So, I have respect to anyone to open up about addiction. I did this as well when I was in an addiction. I used to have a podcast and then I deleted all those episodes because I
yeah.
just didn't think they were useful. And it's almost like that's what he should have done. Is like once you realize that, I don't know if he's actually out of an addiction now, but if he is, what I would do is be like, look, this book is bullshit. Don't buy my book because I was full of bullshit back then. I was in an addiction because he was in an addiction when he wrote this.
What year is it?
This is years old though. This is like 10, 15 years old,
Has he
maybe
written
older.
anything since, or
Yeah,
I
yeah. He
mean,
wrote a
because
book.
I think I've read some or listened to some pretty recent podcast stuff where he still talks about being ADHD.
No, no, you're right. Actually, it's not even as old as I thought. It says here, copyright Gabor Maté 2018. I know he's got the myth
Oh
of
yeah,
normal
that's not
people,
old.
the myth of normal people, but I looked on Google actually, and there was a Guardian article in 2023 which seems to suggest he was still in an addiction. Because I was curious if he's still in an addiction or not, and it seems like he is basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I had of, I mean, now I've got out of one. That's why I deleted all those old episodes because I realized I was just talking nonsense in them. Like I was still
Well,
in
and
the
you
addiction.
also roasted yourself. We don't just roast other people, you roasted yourself, remember?
Yeah, exactly. Like I've come on this podcast many a time and I've looked back and critiqued my own language in the past and been like, look, this is why I was in an addiction because this is how I used to think about things. Because it does depend on your thoughts, right?
I
Okay.
think that makes you so credible.
Well, thank you. Maybe we'll see.
Yeah,
We'll let the listeners decide. But
yeah.
yeah, thank you. Okay. Anyway, so here's some examples of him actually being in an addiction. So basically, he has like a CD buying addiction. I don't really get it, but yeah, anyway, he says, I listened to selections yesterday when I went to the store to pay off my latest debt, but resisted the urge to purchase. Today, it's clamoring for me to return and pick it up. I must have it. I must have it now. The desire first arises as a thought and rapidly transforms itself into a concrete object in my mind with a weight and a pull. It generates an irresistible gravitational field. The tension is relieved only when I succumb. An hour later, I leave Sakura's with the Vidazon disc and several others. Hello, my name is Gabor, and I am a compulsive classical music shopper. So I mean, there's just so many junky thoughts in there. I don't know where to start.
So he just keeps doing it, right? He just wants you know.
Yeah, and then he
Is it
talks
really
about. Sorry,
is
go
it
ahead.
causing him that many negative consequences? I mean, he describes it like it's just like the be all end all of like, I don't know. Wow.
Mm. He
I
says
don't feel
here.
like that about anything. Oh my God, the beat rock in my head and just have to have the
Mm,
about a music CD.
yeah, that's
Wow,
addiction for you. Yeah.
wow.
It says
I
here,
don't, yeah, I got
as
it.
of now, mid-February, I've blown $2,000 on classical CDs since the new year. So this, he wrote this mid-February, whatever year he wrote it in. Since the new year,
Two
he's blown
thousand dollars in 6 weeks.
yeah, $2,000 in 6 weeks. I've broken my word to stop binging, pledged with maximal contrition to my wife, Ray, after my $1,000 pre-Christmas and Boxing Day splurge. Day in, day out, I've obsessed about what music to get and spent countless hours poring over write-ups on classical music websites, time that could have been devoted to family or to writing this book with its rapidly approaching deadline.
Wow, full on addiction. Wow,
Yeah. He
wow.
talks about
What's his intent for sharing this information? Is he just sharing to say,
I think what he's trying to do throughout the whole book is kind of compare himself to his Portland patients. Like he says, I do not equate my music obsession with the life-threatening habits of my Portland patients, because Portland patients are like serious, like drug addicts. Far, far.
Portland here?
No, no. This is in,
Portland, Maine?
I'm not sure where it is. It's in Canada.
Oh, okay, Portland. Huh.
Oh,
Okay.
I think they're no, the residents of the Portland Hotel. That's what it was.
Okay, gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, I
Yeah, yeah.
remember. I think we talked about this before and it was confusing. Yeah, okay, so
Yeah,
mhm.
he says, my addiction, though I call it that, wears dainty white gloves compared to theirs. Um, anyway, and then he's on about, suddenly I cannot imagine my life without this Dvorak symphony cycle, or this or that, blah, blah, blah. Talks about these other like sort of music that he wants to listen to. I cannot abide another moment without, and then, he talks about more music that he wants to listen to. You see the helplessness of like, I cannot imagine my life, I cannot abide another moment. And then he says, I read and write, eat, and even sleep with music in my ears. I cannot walk the dog without a sonata, a symphony, an Avias sounding on the earphones. My thoughts and feelings and inner conversations about recorded classical music are what I wake up to in the morning, and they tuck me in at night.
Wow. Classical music addiction. Why the helplessness is just so like it's just like every single sentence is like he's helpless to buying and listening to classical music constantly.
Mm. Yeah, he says later on, he says, I hated myself, and this self-loathing manifested itself in the harsh, controlling, and critical ways I deal with my sons and my daughter. And this is the thing, like, this is where I've got like quite big respect for him overall, and because he is very honest in it. I mean, I don't respect that he's
Okay.
really like tried to give advice on addiction, but I think I kind of got to the point with this book, and it sounds mental because he's like 50 years older than me or something. But honestly, I just had like a shit ton of like empathy for him in a way because I do think he's tried his best to help people, but you can just tell he's like deep in an addiction and he doesn't know what to do.
Wait, what did you say about him his son and his daughter?
Well, he was
Who?
saying like his addictions like impacted those areas of his life, a massive amount as well.
Okay. All
So
right, so there's some serious negative consequences. So this is because he's listening to classical music all the time and not participating in his life with his children.
yeah, and I think it's just like
Okay,
constant conflict as well,
okay,
being
gotcha.
being out of it. Um,
Okay.
yeah, and then later on in the book, he talks about I usually begin my CD buying binges with only one or two discs, but with each purchase, the craving increases. In the
Oh
end,
wow.
I'm hauling home hundreds of dollars worth of recorded music every time I visit that den of inequity, Sikura's music store. Withdrawal consists of irritability, a generally glum mood, restlessness,
Wow.
and a sense of aimlessness. No doubt it has its chemical components. I'm experiencing the effect of diminished dopamine and endorphin levels. Yeah,
Wow.
okay. And then later on in the book, let's see what else he says. He says, okay, there's a lot of It says music gives me a sense of self-sufficiency and nourishment. I don't need anyone or anything. I bathe in it as in amniotic fluid. It surrounds and protects me. It's also stable, ever available, and something I can control. That is, I can reach for it whenever I want. I can also choose music that reflects my mood, or if I want, helps to soothe it. As for forays to secure us, music seeking offers excitement and tension that I can immediately resolve and a reward I can immediately attain, unlike other tensions in my life and other desired rewards. Music is a source of beauty and meaning outside myself that I can claim as my own without exploring how, in my life, I keep from directly experiencing those qualities.
Wow. So maybe you should just prescribe classical music for his drug addicted patients. I don't know.
See what I mean? It's kind of crazy how addicted he actually is or was. I mean, I don't know if he's
And
still in
these
this.
descriptions are just phenomenal.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
helplessness that he
I had no
uses
idea
around it.
that was in that book, you know?
Yeah. And then he talks about his work addiction as well. He has like a work addiction. He says, for a long time, it was impossible for me to turn down work. The drug of being wanted was far too powerful to refuse. And in any case, I needed the flame of constant preoccupation to ward off the anxiety or depression or ennui that always lurked at the edges of my psyche. Like any addict, I use my addictions to help regulate my moods, my internal experience. On weekends, when the beeper fell silent, I felt empty and irritable, the addict in withdrawal.
Well, this is way more intense than I thought, as
Mm,
far as him being like, self-proclaimed addict.
yeah. What's like your thoughts on it?
Well, why is someone who is so clearly addicted and admittedly addicted dispensing addiction recovery advice?
Mm,
That makes no sense.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
It
it is
it just
crazy.
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. It
But
makes you kind
again,
of
then again,
yeah.
Oprah Winfrey was going to write a book on dieting, or whatever, on weight loss, so weight loss.
Yeah.
And I remember somebody made a meme that said, that's like Dr. Phil writing a book about hair tips. Dr. Phil's
Yeah,
totally
yeah,
bald.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing. Poor Gabor.
Yeah,
I
exactly,
feel bad
exactly.
for him
Yeah. He
at this
says
point.
for
I
much
feel,
of the writing of Hungry Ghosts, so that's this book, I continue to relapse, binging, lying, shamed, and hollow. Despite
wow.
despite my earnest resolutions, 'cause he talked earlier in the book about his one time going to the 12 step group. He says, despite my earnest resolutions, I never returned to the 12 step group, nor did I follow any other program consistently.
Wow.
So it's
Well,
pretty crazy.
because it doesn't work, with 12 step. If that's the only option you have, no wonder you didn't do it.
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
bad for him.
I
I
know,
had no
right?
idea.
Yeah, it's kind of dark, honestly is. He then also talks about this like time where he was like turning up for work late all the time. So then he like decided that he came in one day he said on Monday I'll be there at 9:30. I'll be bringing 10 signed undated checks for $100 each, made out to the Portland Hotel Society. Any day I'm even 1 minute past 9:30, you date the check and deposit it. Should those 10 run out, I'll bring in another 10. So basically, he promised the people at his work, like, I'm going to be on time from now on, and you're going to get $100 every time I'm late, right? And then I think he says he uh, he had to cash nine of those checks out. So he ended up paying $900 for being late, but that was due to his addiction as well, because he kept on turning up late because he was like getting distracted by like going off and venturing into the music store, Sakura's quite a lot. I think, anyway. I might be wrong on that. He says the pre-written checks are not a form of self-punishment, but a way of building a structure that helps keep me sober. They would not be necessary if I possessed sufficient self-regulation. I would just show up on time.
Wow. Just, yeah. So he's compulsively late too.
Oh yeah, this is the bit on attention deficit disorder. He says, I'm chronically and notoriously late to work, to meetings, to family gatherings. I've been able to blame that propensity partly on ADD because a deficient time sense is a well-known feature of attention deficit disorder.
Yeah, well, he's just one of the millions
Yeah.
getting, diagnosed with ADHD because he has addictive behavior that's unresolved.
Yeah.
Welcome to the bajillion people that the same thing is happening to. I wonder if he takes Adderall or whatever else they prescribe for that.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know. Oh yeah, and then later on in the book, I think this is the final example I'll give, but he talks about, I finally struck on the bright idea of putting a tiny lock into the hole in the prong of the television plug, preventing it from fitting into the socket. I entrusted the key to Ray, that's his partner. Under no circumstances should you give me the key, I instructed her. No matter how much I whine, cajole, promise, pester, or beg. The inevitable outcome was that I would whine, cajole, promise, pester, and beg until Ray capitulated. After a few episodes of this, she threw the key at my feet. Your problem, she said. Because that was about, in his medical school days, he says he'd often escape into television addiction, mindlessly flipping channels without enjoying anything he watched, wasting precious hours and keeping himself awake late into the night. So it's a very sort of Atomic Habits-esque sort of strategy
Oh,
there to try and deal with his
so
television addiction.
TV also, not just classical music CDs. You also had a TV thing.
I think this was when he was at medical school, so that might have been many years ago. But yeah, I mean, I just really rate the
Well,
honesty, as I say.
good
But
for her throwing the key at his feet. Your problem.
yeah,
What are you dragging her into it for? It's just,
yeah,
oh
yeah.
God, it's so sad, Tom.
I know, I know.
Everybody, I mean, I just feel bad for him. I used to look at him and think, God, he's such an egotistical, whatever, and I find him annoying, to listen
Mm,
to him talk or whatever. I'm sure people find me annoying too, but whatever. Um, but now I feel like it's just sad.
mm,
He's trying to, I don't know, sad.
yeah, yeah. I think that's partly why I wanted to try to find as much good in this book as I could as well. Like, 'cause I do think he's tried really hard to like bring in as much information as possible to create something
Yeah.
useful to people, and he has worked, with plenty and plenty of people, and he's probably helped a lot of people as well. Alleviate feelings of shame and maybe not get to quite as extreme a place by talking to them, etc. But in terms of actually overcoming addiction, yeah, it's not the one, and it can make problems worse for people if they read this stuff and think there's actual like, good information in here to overcome
And he's
addiction.
trying to help himself. And if people are like, he is the guy, and they're listening to his stuff, that's going to validate their own helplessness and their own addictions.
I think overall it's quite dangerous, like genuinely quite dangerous to society to have
Seriously,
books
yeah.
rated
Yeah, yeah.
by people in addiction.
I agree.
That's the problem. But now let's get on to like more of the solution side of things. Like why is he actually addicted? Because it's all around, well, a lot of it to me it's around language, right? And the language he uses, it's just helplessness, unanswerable questions. It's just
We've
pervasive throughout
heard
the
a
whole
ton of it
book.
already. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've already heard loads, but let's really go into this because I'm hoping that people can hear this and start to shift the way they think about things and hopefully shift from, the helpless stance into more of an empowered one by hearing
Yeah.
all of this stuff. All right, so, okay, I'm just going to read out a load of stuff and we'll just go back and forth and see what happens. When I get on the bus in this outfit, oh, so this was actually from, oh no, we'll go on to the second one because that was from like one of his clients who obviously has a lot of junky thinking because she was deep in addiction as well. But he says, it fears and rejects them, and they, in turn, do not understand its rules and cannot survive in it. All right, so that was in the context of his hardcore drug addicts who like can't survive in society, like can't function in society normally because they're so addicted to all these drugs, and now they have to go to this like Portland hotel to get his help. But the way he says, like, the normal world basically fears and rejects them, and so they don't understand its rules and they cannot survive in it. We saw that a lot earlier as well, is this idea of like, I cannot go without this thing. It's like, well, actually, you can. It's just it's going to be uncomfortable. You know, that shift of language of I
Yeah.
cannot do something into, well, you can actually do this thing. Really, really important.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed.
Yeah. Says present day addicts turn to drugs for a reliable energy boost.
Well, they turn to drugs to stay out of withdrawal.
Yeah, exactly. It's not for a reliable energy boost. Many addicts report similar improvements in their social abilities under the influence, in contrast to the intolerable aloneness. Intolerable, the key word there.
Aloneness. So
Yeah,
they do drugs because they don't want to be alone.
yeah,
And that's I just find it to be such bullshit because the truth is I like to be alone a lot of the time, alone, I mean, intolerable aloneness. It's like I think being alone is valuable and it's intolerable what they feel like is intolerable when they want to do their addictive behavior.
yeah,
Doesn't really have to do with being alone. They could be in a room of 100 people and still want to do their addictive behavior.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And it's also, again, like pointing at all these different explanations for why people engage in their compulsive behavior. Do you want to just explain quickly, like, I know we've already talked about it a lot, but
Yeah,
what is the reason people actually want to engage in compulsivity? Because, Gabor Maté shares about 50 different like reasons why people want to engage in their compulsive behavior or why they do. But what's the real reason? Why do people actually engage in compulsivity?
because they're wired. The neural pathways are wired from wanting to do it to acting on it. And that's that pull in the brain. That's the discomfort. That is, they feel uncomfortable until they act on it.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
exactly.
why, not rocket science.
And then the addicted part of the mind looks for the reasons to justify and rationalize it to keep people addicted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because they feel deprived. They feel like they can't do it unless they go, well, they got this reason that they can. Now I did it because of this, rather than I did it because I wanted to do it and it felt uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly that. Okay,
Yeah.
some more junky thoughts. Strange to say, it makes their lives more livable in the short term. It's hard to get a good night's sleep on the street. Crystal meth keeps you awake and alert.
What's the point of that?
Just basically validating why people choose to engage in
Okay.
compulsivity.
Okay. So they do it because well, yeah. Well, the thing is when you're addicted to meth, highly, highly addictive, well, yeah, you're not going to be alert or you're not going to be anything useful when you're in withdrawal. You know what I
Mm,
mean? It's like that's why they want to do it because they're
mm,
in the vicious cycle of addiction.
yeah.
They're either in withdrawal or they're high.
Mm,
With math, there's one or the other. You're either in withdrawal or you're high,
yeah.
right? So that's why they don't function unless they're high, you know. But that doesn't mean they can't get out of that.
Yeah.
But I'm finding a lot of this information to be not useful.
Well, worse than that, detrimental.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yep.
It
Oh
says,
yeah, you can't function unless you go get high.
yeah, exactly. That's kind of the idea, really.
Yeah.
Um, one consequence of spiritual deprivation is addiction, and not only to drugs. And then he goes on to say, but at the core of all addiction, there lies a spiritual void.
Oh, they're back to the spiritual void again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
And then,
Well, the thing is there's plenty of people, that find God and then some, and then and then supposedly that that's how they get out of their addictions, but they
mm,
they become addictive about that. They become evangelical and they can become, pushing their crap on everybody else. And it's just all about their spirituality nonstop, constantly, Jesus and all the stuff. They just become very evangelical,
yeah,
rather than just finding their own spiritual, fulfillment in some way. If you
mm,
try to overcome addiction with spirituality, well, then you become obsessed about that, you know?
Yeah, for
And that
sure.
doesn't really help anybody too much.
Exactly. And I
Yeah,
think,
okay, maybe they're not drinking themselves to death because they found God, you know, but what I've seen is religious, you know, spiritual quests, whatever, can become as obsessive as a drug addiction.
not only that, but just like pursuing some spiritual quest, like it's a really good, viable thing to do, but it's got nothing to do with the inevitable moment of compulsive desire. When you have that
Yeah,
brain wiring, you have craving, and you're on this spiritual quest, like what are you gonna do there in that moment that you have an urge? You know, you're actually gonna be able to think through that choice to rewire that neural pathway or not, and that's really
yeah,
important as well. Um,
yeah,
We've
yeah.
got a bit here where he asks himself some unanswerable questions. Now, unanswerable questions for anyone in the program will know are questions created by the addictive part of the mind to spin you into a state of helplessness. They just make the problem way worse asking these questions. We disengage from them. But he
Yeah.
asks himself, what's wrong with loving music, with having a passion for great art, with the search for the sublime in aesthetic experience? And then he goes on to say, we humans need art and beauty in our lives.
Whole different topic. You
Yeah.
know, this, whether you're suffering in an addiction or out of trying to get out, whatever, has nothing to do with how much people need or want music in their lives.
Mm, mm.
What does music have to do with addiction other than he's addicted to it, you know, or what, you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
unanswerable question for sure.
yeah,
Let's go and let's go research the philosophy behind how music enhances people's lives or something. I don't know. It doesn't really have anything to do with it.
yeah,
You know, how does this help is people that are drug addicted at the Portland Hotel?
yeah. No idea. Yeah.
Unanswerable questions.
I think the thing is as well, and we'll probably get onto it later, but it's kind of this idea of like, ah, we're all in it together. Like we can all be addicted. There's no shame around this. Let's all come together and be addicted. And it's like, yeah, totally agree with the shame side of things. Like it can be good to hear these stories and hear like, look, you're not alone. Like other people are in this addiction and it gets dark for sure. But also that's useless if you don't actually have a tool to change the neural pathways and get out of it. If you're surrounded by helpless language, you're gonna just have your addictive part of the mind feeding on that shit, and it's just gonna make it worse. Which is why when I was in like these porn addiction recovery communities for like 10 years, it just made the problem inexplicably worse because I was just conditioning my own brain into a state of helplessness just over and over and over by both relapsing and then having that relapsing validated by all these people with their junky thoughts saying, oh, it's okay, you know,
Yeah,
it's a journey, you know, you'll get there eventually, you know, let's just
yeah,
talk about it. Day one again tomorrow. No, no, no.
yeah. Well, let's just decide that music addiction is a good addiction.
Yeah, just junky thinking. Then we got here, you know, so really, isn't it human to want beauty? Question mark. To crave it, even? Question mark. And I do adore the music. You know, reasonable engagement at reasonable times. I like music, sure. You know, I was in
Yeah.
the gym earlier today listening to some banging album. I was enjoying myself, lifting some weights. It was good fun, but I'm not here like having an orgasm over it and glamorizing it and asking myself all these questions. That's a
And
function of being
ignoring
in
your
addiction.
family
Yeah, yeah.
and arguing with your wife who's sticking I guess that was the TV or whatever, but you know,
Mm,
it's all of it. It's just irrelevant.
yeah. Says.
Junkie thinking, unanswerable questions, 100%.
Yeah. The
Yep.
addict craves the absence of the craving state. For a brief moment, he's liberated from emptiness, from boredom, from lack of meaning, from yearning, from being driven, or from pain. He is free.
All of those things. No, you've avoided the withdrawal, the discomfort of withdrawal for a moment.
Yeah,
It isn't
exactly.
because you have the void and the emptiness and the blah 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 blah. If you have all these things, man, you know, wow, what a bummer.
Mm, mm.
What a
And
bummer.
then we've got some self-deprecating junkie thoughts here. Now, this is very common as well. You know, most people in
Yeah.
addiction, they have a lot of self-deprecation going on. This is coming from the addictive part of the mind. You want to separate that out from the rational part of the mind. But he
Mhm.
says, it's not a music lover standing at the counter, but an abject weakling. This is how he's talking about himself, an abject weakling. I sense they pity me. This is when he's at the music shop, like buying CDs. And then he's like, that's how I am, self-deprecating, pessimistic, or negative comments creep into my conversations.
Okay, is he just this human is just seeking beauty, or is he a what kind of weakling at the, what is
Yeah.
it?
Exactly. Could go around in circles trying to figure that out all day long. Um, in my shame, I don't believe I deserve any praise. My negativity stems from my internal dissatisfaction, my harsh self-critic, he calls it. We'd call that the addictive part of the mind. How can I see the best in her when I'm blind to all but the worst in myself? And then he's talking about, I think, his relationship with one of his clients. I hated myself, and this self-loathing manifested itself in the harsh, controlling, and critical ways I deal with my sons and my daughter.
This is all just like someone living in an addiction and paying all the consequences and
Mm.
spinning out in a bunch of unanswerable questions, going totally in the wrong direction to resolve this in any way, shape, or form, and then passing on this same sort of thinking to people that are trying to overcome addiction. It's destructive.
Yeah, absolutely. And then he
Yeah.
talks about, sorry, we're going to say something else there.
No, 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 no. I was done.
Yeah. He tells about his experience of going to a 12 steps meeting. And then he says at the end, I mean, he doesn't actually come back, but he says, I will come back, I decide. What I've witnessed here are humility, gratitude, commitment, acceptance, support, and authenticity. I so desperately want those qualities for myself. Nowhere do I see such power and grace as at my AA meetings. A writer friend has told me. A manic depressive with a long history of alcoholism. She's been attending for 15 years and she's been urging me to do so. I finally get what she means.
15 years, that's a long time.
It's a long
Go to
time.
meetings. Wait, because you're just dealing with desires for 15 years? Wow.
Yeah,
Why do they call it recovery?
controlling and managing an addiction. That's all it is.
Yeah. And I
About
thought he
freedom.
did, I thought he didn't go to his meetings or something, or went to a meeting
He
and left.
didn't. He didn't. He
What a
said he was going
guru.
to go, but then he just didn't. But the thing is with that, what really stood out is like him kind of glamorizing the meeting when really it's like there's nothing glamorous about being in an addiction. I love the group we've got in school. We've had like just a
Same.
shit ton of wins from the guys this week, like all these comments and everyone being like, oh yeah, this has happened in my life, this is great, blah blah blah. And it's really nice to see. But to be
Yeah.
honest with you, the program that we run isn't designed just for the community. I love the community side. I want to build that a lot larger because I think it is useful to alleviate those feelings of shame and sort of understand addiction in more detail. But there's this North Star guiding everything, which is how do you actually change addictive neural pathways? That's the critical part. If you go
Yeah.
into meetings and you don't have someone actually saying, well, this is what we should be doing, and identifying junkie thoughts, identifying unanswerable questions, you're going to be going around in circles for years and years and years. That's the experience of a lot of guys who
Well, I used to have groups where the junkie thinking they would just feed off each other.
yeah,
And I'd have to be like, stop, everybody just stop. It was amazing. Without serious, assertive regulation,
mm,
junkie thinking would run rampant in a group like that without someone who actually has the education to identify it and change it and stop it.
yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, wow.
Yeah,
Interesting stuff. I had no idea where that this is where this was going.
yeah. Is this like worse than you thought it would be?
Yeah, definitely. I
Yeah,
thought he just spoke about being like OCD or ADHD, just like
mm,
not just full on having these addictions that he
yeah,
is going to meetings for, and
yeah.
all of that.
And like the language as well is like so insane.
Oh yeah,
Once you know what we know, it's like, what the
oh
hell
yeah,
is going on?
yeah, yeah.
Um, and then also just the way he's trying to explain how addiction is caused with all these different ideas. It just causes so much more confusion. This is why, I was in France when I was reading this, right? And I was just like chilling out, maybe eating a baguette, maybe like sitting by like the nice like water and stuff and just like seeing a new part of France. And I'm reading this book and taking all these notes. And I said to you multiple times in France, I was like, Mary, the addicted part of my mind is reading this stuff and feeling a lot of I'm feeling a lot of discomfort from reading this because the addicted part of my mind was reading it and going, this is a bit interesting. And it's like, that's what the addicted
Yeah,
part of the mind will do. If you don't have a direct, concise method to deal with addictive neural pathways, the addicted part of the mind is going to go crazy. And it's going to
yeah,
like latch on this stuff and love it because it basically validates helplessness. It feeds the addicted part of the mind, which is
yeah.
dangerous. This is why one of my closest friends is in an addiction because she loves Gabor Maté and she's deep in an addiction. She goes to one of these recovery groups now, and I know that's not going to work for her, unfortunately. I hope one
Yeah.
day she listens to this and she gets the right help and overcomes it. But, I just, in France, I just use my script more times because reading this stuff is so crazy. So I was just using my script, processing any
I'm
of the
shocked.
thoughts, and then I was fine and it just wasn't a problem. But that's what you got to do. Anyway, addiction has biological, chemical, neurological, psychological, medical, emotional, social, political, economic, and spiritual underpinnings, and perhaps others I haven't even thought about. To get anywhere near a complete picture, we must keep shaking the kaleidoscope to see what other patterns emerge. How bad is that?
Oh my God. Like what does it all matter? It just doesn't matter. What do you want for yourself and how you gonna get out of it? It's just
Yeah.
like all these it's you know, I don't want to be rude, but it's boring.
Hmm.
I'm bored. I'm bored
Yeah.
right now. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking about nice day out there in the garden. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. It's rude, but it's really at this stage, I'm bored. I don't
Yeah.
know how you got through that whole book.
See what I mean? This is why it gave me such a headache. Like,
Yeah,
genuinely, it did. Like, just reading this book, taking all these notes, took so
yeah,
long. Um,
mhm,
yeah, I mean, you could be shaking that kaleidoscope forever. You're never going to stop shaking it. That's for sure.
yeah.
The addict comes to depend on the substance or behavior in order to make himself feel momentarily calmer or more excited or less dissatisfied with his life. Environmental cues associated with drug use, paraphernalia, people, places, and situations are all powerful triggers for repeated use and for relapse because they themselves trigger dopamine release. People trying to quit smoking, for example, are advised to avoid poker if they're used to having a cigarette while playing cards. When
Glamorizing, glamorizing, helplessness, helplessness. It's like, oh, what? So now you can't even play cards if you're an ex-smoker?
Well, apparently,
Change your life.
yeah.
Rather than change your neural pathways.
Although my addictive tendencies are most obvious in my compact disc buying habit, I can shift seamlessly into other obsessive activities. The week we moved into our present home 24 years ago, I attended the birthing of six babies, most of them at night. I'd accepted into my practice 15 women whose due dates came that month, about 10 too many for a busy family physician. I couldn't say no to being wanted. The idea of I couldn't say no to being wanted, so that's why he took on
Yeah.
more and more work. But he
That's
could
just
say
more
no.
addiction.
Yeah,
That's more
exactly.
addiction, more addicted neural pathways on,
Mhm.
you know, oh, yeah, wow.
It says, I have thrown myself equally blindly and avidly into political work and other pursuits. I've even had several of my addictions up and running at the same time. That is, the addiction process was active and looking for more and more external trophies to capture.
Trophies, wow. Addiction trophies.
Mm.
Wow. Yeah.
The shame arises because indulging the addiction process, even with an ostensibly harmless object, only deepens the vacuum where connection with the world and a healthy sense of self ought to arise. The shame is that of self-betrayal. When I tell my Portland patients about my addictive behavior and how it feels on the inside, the craving, the unbearable urgency, the relapses, the shame, they all nod their heads and laugh in recognition.
Laugh.
Yeah, laughing recognition at him, like also being an
That's
addiction.
weird because I thought that there might be some laughs to be had with the inane advice that coming out of this, but I don't find this any of this funny. I find it incredibly sad. And truthfully, I mean, I don't know how much more we got to go in this book, but I really don't have anything more to say. This is sad. It's really sad. Certainly not anything I'm going to laugh over, you know.
Yeah.
All those sticky notes.
Probably
No.
only halfway through, to be honest. We can wrap it up here if you want, but yeah, I mean, there's
Yeah,
so
I
much
don't
more.
I don't even see a point. And I think it might be even more powerful to just wrap it up here because it's just more of the same thing, saying it some kind of a different way, all validating his addictions. It's sad. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's just sad. So yeah, it's been a pretty long. We've been on almost a couple hours already anyway. So
Mm, cool.
it's really, yeah, wow. I don't know how you plowed through the rest of it, really. I
Yeah.
would have 86'd it. I would have 86'd it a long time ago, but yeah, I don't
Yeah.
want to laugh because I really feel bad for him, you
Mm,
know.
yeah. It's pretty heavy, to be honest with you, to just know,
Well, and
like,
I feel bad for the people that he's treating as well,
mm,
because they're probably in a very bad way as well. When
yeah.
that's your guidance, that's your leadership, that's your mentor, your education is lacking, not just lacking, but validating
Mm,
hopelessness and wow,
yeah.
intense. Yeah.
All right. We'll wrap it up there, but yeah, I mean, there's so much more, to be honest, to get through in terms of junkie thoughts. Maybe I'll go do this sort of on my own sometime
Yeah, if you want.
and just cover it because, yeah, I mean, I think if anything, this just points out like quite how messed up our society is right now. If like the probably the world leading expert on addiction recovery, like the most famous guy on addiction recovery, is that
Yeah.
deep into an addiction himself and
Yep.
uses a certain language, it just shows how bad a state we're in right now.
Well, they teach it, they use his stuff in school. Like this ex-friend of mine was he went to school, became a alcohol and substance abuse therapist.
Mm,
And Gabor Maté was in his curriculum that he was studying in school.
yeah.
Wow. No wonder we're in such a shit show, hey?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But help is here.
Help is here, man. Thank goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom, for everything you do and bringing that to us because wow, it's really important. And hopefully a lot of people are going to listen because if they're, have the number one authority on addiction is telling them this stuff and they're feeling hopeless and helpless, well, so don't. Help is here. It is here.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
You,
yeah.
you got to realize like if you're listening to this, you've basically ended up in an addiction because you've been brainwashed to believe all this helplessness around you. And like you've gone on a mission like myself, I'm guessing anyway, because we're by far the most popular when it comes to addiction recovery. A lot of people don't like this sort of podcast. We don't get that many listens, to be honest, maybe into the hundreds, the low thousands perhaps, but we're not like some big famous sort of podcast production, right? And if you're listening to this, I just hope you know like look, there's nothing wrong with you for having this problem. You're getting lied to day in, day out by these people literally in addiction themselves, sort of talking rubbish. We did Atomic Habits recently. We analysed, critiqued that, and it was full of absolute nonsense as well. Gabor Mate's book, full of addiction, unfortunately. I've just bought two copies of this because this is a guide to rational living for anyone watching or listening. I've just bought two copies of this because I'm going to be
Yeah.
going to the Amalfi Coast with my girlfriend next week, which I'm looking forward to, and I want me and her to be reading this. And yeah, I mean, look, if you don't have like much money at all, but you got £10, this is probably what I'd recommend: A Guide to Rational Living by Albert Ellis. It doesn't cost much. It's a good starting place to start thinking rationally again. If you want to read a non-fiction book to actually help you, and then obviously if you want more help with addiction recovery in particular, we are here to help. And you can go to www.beyondcompulsionacademy.com to learn a little bit more. I've got like almost 100 blogs on there now as well on the addictive part of the mind and much more. Give that a read if you fancy it. Cheers for listening, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.